I'm going to get started and other people will keep joining us. I have my wonderful assistant, Megan Valley Minnick. We've known each other for a long time. She used to work at the same school where I was. And then she moved to St. Louis. And years later, I kept thinking the perfect assistant for me would be that wonderful Megan Valley. I wonder what happened to Megan Valley. And I found her and she said, I would love to do that. So she's been my remote assistant and just been incredible. And I'm so grateful to her. Thank you, Megan, for helping make this happen and for spending your Friday night doing it with us. You're all muted. I hope you don't mind. Please chat as much as you want to, though. Chat comments and questions and things you're thinking about. And Megan and I will keep responding to that so that we can be interactive. I'm Paula Lillard-Preschlack. I am so happy to be with you today. And we're going to talk about this book, which hopefully some of you have read, and that's why you're here, or you're here to find out more about it. Really excited to hear your thoughts and ask you questions. And I hope that you'll feel comfortable asking me questions as well. So do chat in where you're calling in from. I'll tell you, I am here in my writing room in Illinois, Lake Forest, Illinois, and the sky is dark, dark, dark purple. It looks like we're going to have a thunderstorm. So if for any reason we lose each other, just know that as long as it's within the hour, I'll try to come back. But nothing's happening yet, so maybe nothing will. But this is the room where I came to after 25 years of being in the classroom and running Forest Bluff School, which was founded by my mother, Paula Polk Lillard, and my sister, Lynn Jessen. And I stopped running the school so that I could finish this book that I had in my mind. And I spent about 3 months in this room just writing every day, all day. And then I spent 6 years rewriting and shaping it and finding a publisher and editing and going through all of that process. So I really wanted to try to make this book say what we've all been wanting to tell people about Montessori. And I really listened to people as I traveled around. What are you thinking? What are you experiencing? And I felt like we were saying the same things and that this needed to be in a book. So it's interesting because I had a little bit of pushback at certain times about how many different things I was trying to fit in the book. And I just didn't want to let any of it go because I felt that all these points were so important. So I worked really hard with the editors to make sure that it made sense and that every topic was connected in some way. So that's one of the reasons it took so long. And for those of you who haven't read the book yet, I'm going to just show you the table of contents so you can get an idea that the first chapter really gives people an idea of what Montessori looks like in classrooms at each age. The second chapter really explains Montessori as clearly as I could in a nutshell. The third talks about an example of a school, so what a Montessori school might be like and how it might be different from other schools. The fourth talks about authenticity, the challenge that we have to try to capture and understand authentic Montessori. The fifth is about public Montessori programs. And then a chapter for parents about parenting and how we can bring Montessori principles home into our homes and how it can benefit families from home, and even if they don't have a Montessori school nearby. And the conclusion is just really a rally cry, a cry to action to help spread this completely different way of looking at education. And then an epilogue, which is the graduation speech written by a Montessori graduate, which was just really special, a 14-year-old. And I thought it was just the perfect way to end the book. So that's a little synopsis for those of you who are new to this material. And since the book's release in February of 2023, I have been giving interviews and traveling and talking about the book at schools and Montessori conferences. So some of you I've probably met. And it's been so enjoyable and really, really interesting, taking me to some interesting places and sometimes several times in a month. Some of these talks are on my website, which I'll give you at the end. If you're not familiar with it, I have audio recordings of my talks. I have videos. Everything on there is free. Lots of articles for parents and for you. And if you're an educator, and this is just all free resources. So please use that. Join my newsletter. Follow on social media if you just want to keep getting fed. So that's really my goal. I just want to stay connected with people and help them. I know how hard this work is with teaching. I know how hard it is raising children. And I just want to feed everybody who's looking for some nourishment. So this webinar is kind of a wrap up of this stage of this first year and a half of having the book out. And now I really want to help people explore how can we use the book, because it's really meant to be a resource. So for example, the other day I was at a public school Montessori conference, so in Washington, D.C., and we were sitting at a lunch table, and it was a teacher at the lunch table said, I just wish I could get parents in my class and my principal to understand the reasons to not have students pulled out of my Montessori classroom for STEM, for art, for music and everything else. I really want my students to be able to stay with me, and it's hard. I feel like I'm always fighting for that. And I wanted to say, here's my book talks about that. You can use this. You can use the material in here to show principal and parents and explain to them why you're asking for that and why it's so important and the potential that's there if you can do it. Another same conference, I heard a parent say, I wish I could get my school to understand why I want authentic Montessori instead of Montessori inspired. And I have a whole book that talks about that here. So just wanting people to look in there and use that. So I hope people will really, really use it. And what I love hearing is one teacher mentioned to me that she loved reading the book as a parent and she really enjoyed it. But as a teacher, she found it so useful to use it as a reference. And the reason she mentioned that I didn't really think about, but was really great to hear was, how all of these pages have these headings. So it's pretty easy, she said, to go through and find the section that you were thinking of, that you wanted to review, that you wanted to pull out and use for your parents or whatever you're doing. And I also want to mention the index. You can look up in the index any kind of topic that you're looking for. And there's a really thorough index in the back that helps you then to find what you might need wording for in anything that you're trying to communicate about Montessori. So that's one way to really use the book. I also have discussion guides on my website. So there's one for teachers, there's one for administrators, there's one for grandparents, there's one for parents, and you can, and there are others, and you can take that group, like a group of parents, a group of your teachers, with another group of administrators, you can use the book and use those questions to guide you through discussions that will deepen your work and your understanding and lead to all kinds of other conversations. So I hope you'll really use that because it's meant to be used. What we're going to do today in this webinar is, I'm just going to tell you too, people do ask how the book is doing. And so I wanted to mention we've sold over 5,000 copies, which may not sound like a lot, but when you think of novels that sell millions and millions, but for a small niche nonfiction book, that's really, really good. Anything over 3,000 is considered fabulous. So we're already at 5,000. And the book will stay in print, which is really a wonderful thing about working with Chicago Review Press. If you are in another country or speak another language, we do want to get this book published in other languages. It's already in Turkish, and there's already some contracts for other languages. But I just wanted to take a moment to say what you need to do if you are someone who would like to see it in another language is approach a bookstore or a publishing company, and that publishing company will then contact Chicago Review Press and get the manuscript and get the rights and then translate it. So I think they will see that it's profitable for them to do that and profitable for them to publish it in other countries. So we're just trying to keep it spreading. So please email me if you have a question about that. And I hope you'll help to spread that. So today in the webinar, what we're going to do is I'm going to answer some questions that I received previously. And I arranged them by topic. And I'm going to stop and pause to answer questions in the chat as much as we can, and we'll go back to them too. But I also want to stop and ask you questions and see if you might participate by answering some questions too. So let's get started, and we will finish within the hour. So the first question I want to ask you is, what was your favorite part of the book? Or was there a favorite story that really stuck out for you that you might remember? And if you have the book and you're really on top of it, if you can tell us where it was in the book, that's great, but it's okay if you don't. I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes, so you can chat anytime. And then it's sort of like a game. We'll come back to your answers. So chat your answer anytime. What was your favorite part of the book? And I'll answer too. All right, and these are the topics. I kind of arranged the questions I've gotten already into topics. So that's what we're going to do, is go through them like this. Okay, great. So some people had questions about structure versus freedom in Montessori. And this is a big one, right? I love these two contrasting photographs here. One is a stock photo of children in a conventional classroom, and the other is children of the same age, basically, in a Montessori elementary classroom. And I love the striking differences here because it really helps you get into your mind the differences. The very strong structure that we have on the one side, and then the structure in Montessori, which really emphasizes freedom. But I think it's interesting to think of the structure that's in Montessori. I think sometimes people think that Montessori is kind of loosey-goosey. And you know what really helped me to understand and really think about the structure that we have was my sister Angeline, who's a researcher at the University of Virginia. So Angeline Lillard, her book, Montessori, the Science Behind the Genius, has a section about organization and the research in organization. And she really explains so well in there how much structure actually is in Montessori, how the materials are structured on the shelves. And sometimes we don't think about this very much as teachers, but it's very carefully set out in order, and that gives the child structure. The way you give a presentation, all the steps that give structure, the curriculum itself, the way there's so much structure in Montessori, and then within it is that freedom. So I think it's really helpful to remember there is structure in Montessori, but the freedom is in just the right places, and the structure and the scaffolding is in just the right places. So these are pictures I use a lot when I'm talking to parents, and it really helps them. I mean, we could go on and talk about the differences of what's happening in these different pictures, but I think it really, really helps them. So that's a little bit of an answer to the question of, is Montessori too flexible, and does it not have structure? So I think too, I had a question about someone asked what to do with children who come into Montessori a little older. So they're elementary age children and they haven't had any Montessori. And I don't know how many of you here have had that experience, but it's really interesting when that happens. Here's a boy who's probably about 7. He's writing in his work journal in elementary Montessori school. And I think what's really important there is that we take a child who is used to a lot of structure in another setting, and we start them with a lot of structure and a lot of scaffolding. So having that new child sit next to the teacher the first few days, really telling them what they're going to do. Here are your 3 choices, showing them what to do, really helping them get oriented to the room and not giving them a lot of freedom until they really feel comfortable and you can really see that they're ready for it. I think that's so important. Sometimes we as Montessori teachers are so afraid of holding a child back. We want so much to just let them all go. And then you've got chaos on day 6. And it's really okay to start with a lot of structure and scaffolding. That's the kind thing to do, and orienting the child and helping them. So I think even though they're older, even though they can understand things much more quickly, it's important to start them out slowly and to talk with them openly about it. I'm not going to give you as many choices the first few days. You can ask me lots of questions, but I hope that answers that question for someone about how to start somebody new when they're older in your classroom. I always find that really fun because I find that they're so grateful to be there. And it's refreshing sometimes to see that, right? How grateful they are to have this different environment. So I just want to pause, and I'm hoping that you might have answered that first question. This is a picture of my daughter, by the way, when she was really little, and she's just turned 20 the other day. It's really fun to see those early pictures and remember. I'll tell you my favorite part of the book. I would say my favorite part of the book is the journal entries. So in chapter 3, where I talk about school, Forest Bluff School, where I worked for so long, I shared journal entries from when I was a teacher. So when I taught primary, I would write almost every day, but I would definitely write when something funny or interesting happened. And I had all these stories. And then when I taught 6 to 9-year-olds, I wrote down all these stories. And I went back and looked through them and found stories that illustrate so well certain things that I wanted people to know about Montessori and what it's like to teach Montessori. And it's funny because for those of you who might be interested, those are pages 95 to 103. That's where those journal entries are. And I had so many and I had to just choose a few. I hope some of you have had that experience, but it was something that I got pressure to take it out from several different early readers. They didn't feel like it fit in the book. And I said, well, I can't take those out. That's my favorite part. I wanted so badly for readers to get a feeling of the life of what it's like to live with those children and see the light in their eyes and their struggles and watch the puzzling experiences and just the miracles that happen. So it was really important to me to have those in there. They're pretty much verbatim, exactly what I wrote in my journal. Um, but I had to work hard to make them connect. So I said, well, they have to be in there. So we have to find a way. So I've just got to keep rewriting and rewriting how to connect it so that people would understand there's a purpose for having those stories in there. Does anyone else have a favorite part that they want to tell us they enjoyed? I also, people have told me they really like the section about the curriculum and the lesson planning, especially parents have said they often wondered what happens behind the scenes. How does the teacher know what to teach? And how do you cover everything? And so people have told me that was one of their favorite parts, and that's pages 81 to 88 in the book, where it talks about how does Montessori curriculum work and how do the teachers plan their lessons. So, okay, I'm going to keep moving because I don't see anything in the chat. Megan, let me know if I'm missing something, but you can type in there anytime if you think of something or a burning question. Please feel free. I'll just keep rolling otherwise. Okay, we had a question about motivation. Somebody asked, how do you help a child who doesn't want to do anything, who does not want to think or work with the materials, who appears lazy? Well, this was an interesting question. Clearly from a teacher, I think children usually behave that way for a reason because something else is going on. I had a student, for example, once who was 4 years old. So I'd had her for a year already. And all of a sudden, all she wanted to do was draw with colored pencils. And she would do that for most of every day. It was like pulling teeth to try to get her to do other work. And she'd look out the window and just couldn't really figure out what's going on with her. And then about 6 months after that, I find out her parents are getting divorced. So it was, it was like her mind was so focused on that. She had so much that she was trying to process that she couldn't really focus. So sometimes I think when we see a lack of motivation, there's something else like that going on. And sometimes we can never really find out what it is. But I think three things are really helpful to think about. I think if you're a teacher in a situation like that, the first most important thing is the point of entry is the relationship. So really working on the relationship with the child, asking them to sit next to you for lunch, talking with them, just getting to know them, making a personal connection, telling them about your puppy, anything to just make that personal connection, because that's always what comes first is the relationship. The second is the intrigue. Montessori said, it's so important to draw the child in, to really intrigue them with something. Find some material or activity that captures that child's attention. So finding that, and Montessori wrote so much about that. So you crack open almost any of her books, almost any page, you can often find that theme of trying to find just the right thing that draws a particular child in. And the third thing is finding the match of challenge for deeper engagement and flow. And I love this picture because you can really see that for this very tiny boy, getting that thread through that needle is very challenging, and he's completely engaged in it. And finding that match where it's not too easy and it's not too hard is so key. We call that flow, getting into flow experiences. And if you look in the index of the book and you look for the word flow, you'll find a couple places where I wrote about that match. So I hope that answers that question. I have another question for you. I wonder if you see any of these 8 traits, these characteristics emerging in your students or in your children at home if you're a parent. And these are 8 traits. When I wrote the book, I wanted to write it to cover a broad audience and parents mainly, but anybody who cares about education and children. And I wanted to find something to thread through the book so that people could kind of follow along with something from the beginning to the end of the book, a theme that made sense to them, even if they didn't know anything about Montessori. So instead of throwing a lot of jargon at people, I often start with, these are 8 things that I've seen in so many Montessori graduates. and I see where we help these traits develop in Montessori. I'm sure those of you who've been in classrooms can say, yes, I know exactly where some of these traits develop and why. And it happens all over, all the time. Sometimes three things might be happening at once, but these are things I kept seeing. You may see other things as well. But what's fun is everyone can relate to that list of that being important. That's really important that human beings develop these. And in Montessori, we really do it. We don't just say it, we really do it, and we can show it. So I wonder if you have seen places where these traits are visible in your classrooms or at home. You can even type in yes. It was really fun. Some teachers that I knew in a group had a book discussion about the book. And one of the questions that somebody asked the group was, do you see these things in your classroom? And they had a really fun conversation where they all were telling stories about where they saw each of these things. And it was really fun to hear about. Good. Super. Okay. I would say, I'll just tell you a personal story. As a parent, I see courage all the time with my children. Our son just graduated from college and he signed up for a trip to hike in the Himalayas. It's like, wow, that's really, really ambitious. And I think, and he went to Montessori. So I think that that courage, we see that a lot in our graduates, and it's really exciting to see. Okay. I got some questions about different ways of learning. So children with special needs or whatever kinds of definitions you want to use or descriptors you want to use for that. I did want to mention that photographs have nothing to do with the topics. They're randomly selected. I love these two photos because it's a primary child working with the same material. And then I love seeing the older children working with the same material in a different way, right? In a more advanced way, and how inspiring that is to see those connections. But I had a question about this. I'm not a specialist in this particular area. So in the book, you'll find I only wrote a few paragraphs about it. And since we're here to talk about the book, I'm not going to spend more than a few minutes on this. But I think it's important for people to know and realize there are great people doing really interesting work in Montessori with children with greater needs. And it's a complex topic because the Montessori community is so vast. You really do see, or I have seen, different ways of working with children and different methods. And some Montessori educators feel that one is better and some feel another, and some use a combination. There's a lot of variation, and everyone is learning and everyone is exploring and trying to figure out the best ways to help children. There's no one way, but I do know that here are some things that research shows us about how human beings learn and why Montessori is such a good fit for children who need to learn in different ways. Research shows that human beings learn best with their hands when they can touch and move things. And we have the advantage in Montessori because we already have concrete materials that match this need. And everyone in the room is using the same concrete materials. Research shows that repetition aids mastery. And in Montessori, repetition, sometimes repetition through variety, is incorporated into every single material and its use. Research shows that children learn best when multiple senses are employed. And the Montessori materials do this, especially the sensorial materials. Research shows that children often learn best through peer-to-peer interaction and coaching. and Montessori encourages this. And research shows that children learn differently and at different paces. And we observe that children are drawn to different activities that serve their needs. So Montessori not only allows for this flexibility, but Montessori promotes it. So our children get all these different examples of ways that they could learn the same thing. And it's how the room functions every day. It's the design of the program. So this is an evolving topic. I hope that is helpful to think about. And every single story is unique. Every single child is unique. Every single classroom is unique. Every teacher is unique. Every community of children is unique. So there's really no one answer when somebody says it's Montessori for all children. I think you really have to look at every single particular unique situation to know whether it is helping a child best. So I hope that's helpful. All right. Oh, okay. Looking for answers. I hope you'll chat in with me. I want to hear what you think. Any of those traits that you ever see? Are there some? Courage, collaboration? Do you see these with your students, with your children ever? All right, good. Super. All right, here's a third question. This is your last one. So, is there one sentence or phrase in the book that stands out for you? One that you think you'll use with your parents or that you think you'll go back to? If there was something in the book that you read, let us know. And thanks for your answers in here. I'll come back to this in a minute. So if you had something in there that you really liked, do let us know. Okay. This is a great hot topic today. Maria's thoughts on technology. This is something, you really hear parents say often too, and teachers will say, well, Maria Montessori was so enthusiastic about technology. What would she say about computers and so on? Someone mentioned to me that they loved what I said in chapter 4 about the practice of going back to Maria Montessori's words and reading her books for guidance in our decisions as Montessori educators. And then they asked how I think that the new technology might be handled by Maria Montessori today. And I think, we have to think that Maria Montessori talked a lot and mentioned many times that she was very enthusiastic about technology. She does say in several places in her writing that the accomplishments and inventions of mankind, with the exception of war, were marvels to her. And technology in the strictest definition is every invention. So a chair is technology, a pencil is technology, a fork, a broom, a machine, or a tool is technology. And computers were just starting to be used for computing in Maria Montessori's day. She never talked, however, about replacing human abilities with technology. When you think about it, she never said we should give a child some kind of tool that would unbutton their coat for them. Instead, she said we should give them a button frame so that they could learn to use their hands and do it for themselves. These are really important things to think through. To develop their own fingers and their hands and their minds. Montessori never talked about replacing a child's existing powers with the adult's powers or with a piece of technology. Everything in Montessori's approach is about aiding the child's natural development by accessible, concrete means that are not abstract, but are physical and comprehensible to a child's mind at their age and stage of development. So it's something that's really important for us to think through when people are talking about computer use for children. Montessori did start to talk about machine use for adolescents, and she talked about, she writes about the adolescents building a museum of machines, museum of simple machines that they could take apart and put back together. So printing press and a telescope and a typewriter, and that they should have these machines in adolescence so they could really take them apart and put them back together and understand the basics of how things are made. So it's a logical conclusion then that she would say, as you progress, become more and more and more advanced, but understanding the basics and starting from the very physical and concrete is developmentally appropriate. And I think it's really important for parents to learn about that, and for all of us as educators to be remembering that, that's what she said about technology. It's the Montessori approach is so thoughtful. And I think it's so important that we educators take our time to really think things through and talk with each other about each thing, and not rush to the newest curriculum or the newest great new material or whatever it is. That so often someone's selling something and they're eager to push it, but it's really important as we're receiving it that we really think it through really carefully. So I love, somebody put in here, great, thank you. Someone wanted to ask about helping a child get into the flow experience. Mahai Csikszentmihalyi wrote about flow, where the child's focused and concentrated on their work. There was a great article in NAMTA. Yes. Apart from giving materials that are stimulating for the child, it also really helps when the guide is in flow state as well. So the question to me is, in what way can the guide show herself as being in a flow state? Oh, that's such a good question. I love that. I think, gosh, I just always try to express my amazement, show my excitement about something. Isn't that so interesting? That kind of conversation with them. And you really notice when you go in a room and the adult is really excited about what they're learning and about what they're saying and what they're doing and really into it. It feeds the whole room, right? It's like creates this atmosphere. When the teacher sort of seems, and you know how you feel when you're not feeling well, or you're looking out the window, or you're distracted by something, the children sense that as well. So I hope that is helpful. I also had the trainer that I had, Hildegard Sulzbacher. She told us that when all the children are working and you are tempted to interfere with someone and you really shouldn't, instead of, you can sit on your hands, or she said, you can go and look at the shelf and find a material that has a little dust on it that hasn't been used in a while, and take it out very slowly and sit down with it and just start working with that material. And I think that's a really nice way of demonstrating flow, that you're concentrating. And she said, just watch, the children will come over and say, what are you doing? You say, I'm doing this work. And you describe what it is, and then you just keep going, and they watch you concentrating. You put it back on the shelf, and she said, just watch. So many of them then will go and take it out. So I hope that's good too. Enticing, enthusiasm. Yes. Right. Okay, great. I love the comments about flow. Thank you. And then there's another one. Young children are excited to use tools. Montessori education will be more and more important with the advancements of technology, with so much focus on the use of the hands. So true. And there's so much about handwriting, the thought. There's research coming out that's showing the connection between actual handwriting is even opposed to typing. Even if you learned typing first, there's a difference in what happens in the brain and thought processes with handwriting. It's so interesting. It's fascinating to me, and that's going to be really important. As people are starting to realize that there's a lot of negative things about technology for children, especially with social media, kind of looking for schools and places where their children could be away from it. So yes, I agree with you. Also, that's going to make Montessori stand out as an oasis for families to come to. So we really need to stick with what we're doing. Great, thank you. I'm glad that was helpful. So this was a question too. Somebody asked, what impedes teaching and authenticity in our practices? This photograph I took at a public Montessori school, and this is a teacher who's now teaching in China. And she was really wonderful, and you can see how engaged her students are. A couple things are going on in this picture that I appreciate. One is that there's a laptop computer in the background, as you can see. And I think one of the things that impedes teaching for us in Montessori is the pressure to report so much of what's happening. So of course, there's a certain level of reporting that has to happen in a public school setting. And of course, we're recording what we're doing and we're planning our lessons. And it's really important that we keep track of what's happening with students. But anything that's excessive, like having to take photographs of your students and send them to parents during the day, or give daily check-ins to tell someone what their child did, or having to respond to the administrator while you're teaching, or having parents having to answer emails during your lunch break. All those kinds of things that take up teachers' time means less teaching. And it's so, so important for parents and administrators to understand that, because sometimes when I'm observing in schools, I notice very little teaching happening. And it's partly because the teacher's so burned out because they spend so much of their time reporting to adults. And we need the energy and the creativity and the time and the moment and the freedom to just be with the children. Someone said to me today, they love being a Montessori teacher because they said, I feel like I'm in this box all day long with the cuties and I get to, put the world away. And that is so important that we have that as teachers. So I talk to administrators about that a lot, of just, let the teacher do what they were trained to do. And I think as teachers, we need to try to explain to people why it's so important that we have this time. Again, I hope you can find in the book where it says that so that you can get that support and get backed up. But the other thing I love, one of the things I love in this photograph is this avocado. So we know this is a presentation in elementary on the parts of the seed. And the avocado is her prop, and it's real. So it gives the children, I'm sorry, it's the parts of the fruit. It gives the children something real to look at. It connects for them that this is something real, that it applies to the real world. It makes them want to go home and look at strawberries and blueberries and look for the seeds and the fruits themselves. And if she didn't have time after school to drive by the grocery store and get that avocado to bring in the next day, and you also notice she's got some real flowers here too. If we can't do those kinds of things as teachers, if we can't go by the library and bring in a book, if we don't have time to bring in the fruit or the flower or the real item, the whole presentation falls flat. And it just becomes looking at these cards like in any other kind of school setting. So it's really important that we have time. And if we don't have time, that does impede our teaching and it impedes our authenticity. So I hope that answers that question a bit. So if you have answers to the other question about a phrase or a sentence that stands out for you, I'll share for you one that stands out for me, something that I really enjoyed writing and that I do say a lot to people when I'm trying to explain to them what's so special about Montessori. It's on page 85. There's a sentence: Montessori classrooms are much like the interactive spaces where artists, mathematicians, social thinkers, and scientists collaborate. innovate, or pursue their own studies in the company of others. In the case of a Montessori classroom, these topics are all being pursued simultaneously. So I like explaining to people how, the Montessori classroom is like a workroom. And so I hope that you too will find sentences in that book you can pull out and use for people. Oh, great. Here's another one. Page 168, Megan's saying, anyone, even people whose children do not attend a Montessori school, can raise their children with Montessori values and see many positive effects. Yes, I think that's such an important point. And for those who are in situations where they are homeschooling, I have a friend who is in North Dakota, and she's a trained Montessori teacher, but she lives in North Dakota with her husband and her 3 children, way out in the middle of nowhere. And even the school, public school, is very far away. She decided to homeschool. I think that is really important for people to realize that even if they can't find a Montessori school near them, that those values can be part of their lives. So thank you for that, Megan. Okay, this is the very last thing, and I'm going to try to speak quickly because I know we're running out of time. Someone was asking about learning to read in Montessori classrooms, and that also is a big kind of buzz topic these days. I pulled together some photographs here for you to look at with this because, you think about Montessori materials, there's so many different ways that we're working with reading. We've got the sandpaper letters here. We've got the movable alphabet. We've got the phonetic object game down here where the children are decoding and matching it with the object. Those objects are so important. We've got the farm with the 2 boys there reading phrases and describing the animals, bringing in adjectives, starting to bring in verbs, all kinds of things you can do with the farm, understanding parts of speech. We've got 2 children who are 5, where an older one's helping a younger one to decode messages. These are the commands. So find a mop, bring a cup, all those kinds of commands. And with all of these, one thing that I really learned from my mother, Paula Polk Lillard, watching her teach for so many years, she taught for over 40 years, was the importance of handwriting the note to the child very slowly as they're starting to learn to read. So writing out cap, cup, mop, labels of the room, the commands. So it's a message for them to decode. And then they start using these cards. And I mention that because so often I see in classrooms, and it might be from different trainings than the one that I've had, but often there aren't enough language materials in the room. And there are boxes and sets of reading materials from some other method instead. And I think that's such a shame because they don't help the children learn to read the way that Montessori does and to write. So really important for us to really keep these language materials in our rooms, really explore them, really revisit them, learn from each other about them, spread the knowledge about them. There's so much that helps children learn to read in Montessori. In the bottom there, you have a child in elementary reading the grammar boxes, and he hasn't symbolized it yet, but he's moving the pieces around. And I just put that in to just show, even in elementary, everything the children are doing has some reading component to it. So it's just so much reading that happens. Somebody asked, is the reading curriculum enough for all students in Montessori? And to that, I would say I never taught a child in Montessori who didn't learn to read eventually. There's so many different ways for children to find their personal path to reading with Montessori, the repetition, the interest, the way it's all around them. I do think, and we have seen, there are some children who struggle to read no matter where they are, no matter what is happening, right? And we can give those children a little extra help. But to understand that the Montessori classroom has so much that it gives children with reading and how important and valuable that is, makes it so joyful. I love too, have you noticed how many materials and how many activities in Montessori have the word game, the sound game, the phonetic object game, the snake game? So many of them, it's playful, it's playing games. It's so important that we keep that joy in the interactions with the children. So I just wonder if anyone has any last comments or questions. We're going to wrap up. Great. I'm going to read the last things here too. Someone asked, so does that mean for authenticity, any three-part card that we use should be accompanied by the real object whenever possible? No, not necessarily. I think by the time you're at those cards, which are really about matching and reading, that's something different. And that the objects are really the beginning point. I think, you know, if that's what you learned in your training, then that's what you should do. This was concerning me since for a long time, as I'm seeing a trend of overuse of printable materials. Yes, and so am I. Printable materials in the Montessori prepared environment. So it's important for me to know where using a printable comes under authentic Montessori. What's your view on unit studies in thematic studies in a Montessori classroom? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but I'm going to guess sometimes unit studies might be the whole class is doing it together. Maham. I think it's really important to let each individual child go in their own. I'm going to try to find where you are so I can see you if your face is here. There you are. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to, Maham. Just that it's really important that they're able to, every child's able to follow their own. I would never really take children through unit studies. I know sometimes that comes from an administrator or from the school and not from a teacher's idea. But I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. So I'm not sure if I'm asking you, if I'm answering that in a helpful way. But I do think, you know, I mean, if that was in your training that you have those printable cards, then wonderful, and use them, of course. But I do think the more we can have things be real and connect, especially for the youngest children, that's really important. Okay, so you've got, thank you for the inspiration, for writing the book. Thank you for that. Great, wonderful. People are using many printable related to different themes and units and setting a particular shelf. Oh, okay. Setting up a shelf related to a particular theme. Gosh, it's hard for me to answer that without seeing the specific situation. I think the really important thing is too, that we need to find the answers for ourselves by reading Montessori's books, The Absorbent Mind, from childhood to adolescence, to educate the human potential, really looking in there. So often you can find the answer to that, and really observing the children and finding your guidance from them and how they're responding. I think sometimes we want to be careful that we're giving just enough structure to give children scaffolding, but that we don't want to overdo it. And sometimes people want to make so many materials and add so many things. And it's really the adult wanting to do it. And the more you do, the less the children do. Kind of have to leave opening for them to do things by not doing too much, just doing enough to get them to be active they can put everything together that they see goes together. They can make cards, they can draw things. So I hope that helps a little bit. And I think too, just kind of, Montessori was so clear on giving one thing, one material to show one point. So, even in the math materials, if you think about it, we have the stamp game shows a particular thing about math. The spindle boxes shows a particular thing about counting, how each unit can be its own piece, and that many of them together is a number. Whereas the number rods shows a different thing about numbers. It shows the number as an amount that is a different size. So those are two different ways of looking at numbers and two different materials. But we don't have five things that show the same thing. So that is really important. That's where I think you want to watch for that kind of repetition. It's just sort of, why do we need all these different ways of seeing the same thing? Probably just need one way, unless the child creates their own, and then that was their creation. This is my last slide, just saying, please come and visit me. This is a website that has lots of resources for you. There's a new website that's just about the book called the MontessoriPotential.com. That's brand new. And I hope you'll help me spread the word about this book. These pictures here, by the way, on the screen are some alumni that I taught over the years. And I'm sure you too, if you're teaching, have many students that you've watched grow up and do amazing, amazing things with Montessori. So that's what really made me want to write the book, was just want to tell people there are all these outstanding young adults in the world who had Montessori, and there's something so magical about the way that Montessori helped them develop themselves and create themselves. And they say all the time to us how much Montessori meant to them and how much they think that so much of themselves came from their Montessori experiences. So I wish I could be in the same room with you and have these conversations in person. I'm so sorry that we can't, and I wish so much. I hope that you will contact me, invite me to come to your school. Just keep in touch. If you're teaching, God bless you, keep going. It's amazing work that you're doing. If you're a grandparent or a parent or a caregiver, thank you for being here. And just everyone, thank you so much for being a part of this with me. I really appreciate spending the time and having some help finishing up the stage of the book. Next, I'm going to start a Substack and other ways of continuing to write. That's my goal this summer, continuing to write and continuing the conversation. And I look forward to seeing you in those ways. You're free, feel free to unmute and say goodbye if you feel up for it. And I hope that if you haven't read the book, you have a lot of fun with it. You can order it in so many places. Thank you, Leet. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Sojin. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much, Maham. Marilyn. It's really great to see you.
Thank you,
Thank
Paula.
you. Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you were here. Aura, thank you. Good. Okay. We had a recording of this too. So if you're wanting to hear it again, maybe I'll get it up on the website. Thank you. Thank you, Megan, for helping us to do this.
Of course. Thank you so much, Paula.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday night and a great weekend. Thank you for being with me. Appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.